Hello and welcome to episode 357 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert as always, Damien Fay, and me, Andy Leakes. Damien, how you doing?
It's great to be back in the office actually together, because this is one of the first episodes I think we recorded side by side for probably
since Christmas, I think.
Since Christmas, because my family had COVID, which seemed to go on forever. Then Andy's had the same. Like everybody who listens to this podcast can tell you a story how they've had to go into isolation. So all of our respective isolation periods and work from home requirements have gone back to back. So it's good to be able to do the podcast in the same room. I don't think you probably notice any difference actually when you listen to the podcast. But for me and Andy, it's much better, and I enjoy doing it together.
Yeah, and one of the best things about being in the office is we get to kind of talk not just about work stuff, but about home life and everything else. And it got us chatting. And actually, this kind of brings us on to what we're going to cover in the podcast today, I suppose. We're going to sort of go straight into it, because you came in talking, you'd seen some stuff, and it was perfect for a podcast. And we've been chatting about it for the last few hours.
Yeah, so NFTs. And if you've been online at any point, let's be honest, in the last year, you will have seen people promoting NFTs, particularly influencers. You might have seen brands doing it. And there's a lot of questions around it that we were talking about in the office that people have, and questions you guys have sent in as well about the whole NFT universe. So NFT is a non-fungible token. And when I look on my Instagram stream, so don't forget to follow us on Instagram. We're doing lots of stuff on Instagram stories, which have lots of behind the scenes, additional content that we don't put on the podcast or the website. But when I'm always on there, I look at what's going on in the world of Instagram, and I constantly keep seeing images of like avatars of different things, whether it be monkeys, whether it be some sort of dog or some character that's been created that people are selling. And it raises the question, what the hell is going on? And a lot of you have asked about it. And so we're going to do a podcast that explores the NFT phenomenon and try and shine a light on it. And now this podcast isn't going to be a promotion of NFTs in any way. We're just trying to give people some insight. Equally, we're going to show you the risks or talk about the risks involved. Now, the first thing you've got to do is, if you've not listened to podcast 321, where I talked about cryptocurrencies and everything to do with cryptocurrencies, blockchains, all the jargon that's associated with it, including explaining what an NFT is, then go and listen to that show. I've listened back through it before we did this show. I have to say it was a very good episode. We packed a lot into one show talking about everything crypto. So you'll learn about what Bitcoin is, what Ethereum is, but I'll give you a very edited highlight of that just so I can get people up to speed about what NFTs are. But like I say, listen to that show. So we have cryptocurrencies, so things like Bitcoin and Ethereum, and you have blockchains. And the blockchain is effectively a global ledger of transactions and balances of cryptocurrencies. And every cryptocurrency has its own blockchain. So Bitcoin has its own blockchain, Ethereum has its own blockchain. So that ledger, that blockchain, is maintained by a network of computers across the world. So go back to listen to that past episode to explain how that actually works. But the blockchain is where cryptocurrencies will reside. So you have a crypto wallet, which allows you to interact with the blockchain and therefore buy and sell cryptocurrencies if you want to, or use them to make transactions and buy things. Now, on top of that, you can have something called tokens. And this is particularly relevant to the Ethereum blockchain, but not exclusive to it. So rather than just having cryptocurrency transactions that are contained on the blockchain, you can also have something called tokens. And there are two types of tokens. There are fungible tokens and non-fungible tokens. So that's where the NFT comes from. Fungible means that the token represents something that there can be lots of examples of. It's not unique in any way. Whereas an NFT, it represents something that is unique. So to give you an example, the Mona Lisa is unique. So that is non-fungible. Something that would be fungible would be something like a £10 note. Whether you have one £10 note or another £10 note is irrelevant. You don't really care. It could be an item of clothing that you might buy. So whether you buy a particular shirt from a particular retailer, which shirt you get doesn't actually matter because there's lots of the same shirt made. Let's use a football example. You might buy a shirt from Tottenham Hotspur, my favourite club, that might be a medium size, but you don't really care which one you get as long as it's a medium sized Tottenham Hotspur shirt. So that is a fungible item. So tokens have a use in specifying ownership of particular items. And now those items could be digital things or they could be things that are offline. And that is where this whole technology gets quite interesting, as I explored in that past podcast. So an NFT is a non-fungible token. And so in theory, the way the blockchain works, an NFT could be associated with something that was a physical asset. Let's just use that Mona Lisa example again. That it could be used as a digital certificate, a way of validating authenticity and ownership of something in the real world. And by that token, that NFT, being recorded on the blockchain, which the way it's designed, it can't be tampered with. It's very secure the way the technology works. So you could therefore transfer ownership of something by trading or transferring that NFT to somebody else. So I could own the Mona Lisa, the NFT, which is basically a digital certificate of authenticity that resides on the blockchain. I could give that to Andy. Andy would then immediately be the owner of the Mona Lisa. That is a way of thinking about how NFTs could work in the real world. Now, that makes it easier for people to try and understand this technology because at the moment, the way NFTs really work, they're mostly associated with digital assets. So the NFT is essentially, if you think about it, a little box that is on that blockchain that has some information about the item that it represents in terms of ownership. And that's why if you go back to early 2021, you started to get a lot of talk about NFTs because people were starting to try and take ownership of certain memes. And the whole idea of this is something that people find difficult to understand because why would you want to try and own a meme or, for example, the first ever tweet that I think was sold for almost $3 million? Why would you want to own that? And how could you? Because in theory, it's replicated or could be replicated multiple times. You've seen all the famous memes that exist that you share every day. How could you even own one? Or why would you want to say that you owned a particular meme? And this goes back to just human behavior. Think of it in the art world. It's probably the easiest way to try and get a bit of insight into why NFTs are creating quite a stir. If you think of the offline art world, people want to own pieces of art, and the value of that art is largely determined by the desirability of it and people who want to also own it, and therefore somebody want to buy it off you in the future. The scarcity of it is what creates that sort of value. But people make copies of them all the time. The copy of Mona Lisa's everywhere. There's millions of copies. But if you wanted to own the original, then that element of ownership and essentially bragging rights as well, not just as an investment, is why people buy art, for one of the reasons they would do anyway. NFTs can be used to own things like that first ever tweet. If you think about it in a similar way, because although the tweet can be replicated multiple times, or an image, or a cartoon, drawing, or a avatar, whatever it is that person is selling, the fact is that the NFT says that you own the original. And so from that point of view, that is why NFTs have kind of taken off. Now, if we go back to early 2021, we had some high profile NFT sales. And like I said, there was the first ever tweet, and there was an artist called Beeple who does digital art, and they sold an NFT for $69 million in relation to a piece of artwork. Now, what is interesting about NFTs is that if you buy an NFT, and they typically, the way they work, because like I said, they're these little boxes, but what they really contain are something called smart contracts. And you don't need to get into the terminology, but it holds information in there about the asset that it's associated with, but it can also just basically point to an image wherever it's stored. So that's the image that you now have ownership of. Now, just one thing to point out, usually within these contracts, the way they work is you might own the original of something, but you have no ownership of the copyright. The original creator has the copyright, and they have the reproduction rights of that original piece of art. I'm using art as the example because that's most of the time what NFTs are currently used for. So the other thing that can happen is if you're an artist and you decided that you're making whatever it be, it could be poems, it could be drawings, it could be this podcast. We could turn this into an NFT. We could mint an NFT so people could own this podcast episode, but they wouldn't own the distribution rights or the copyright of this. And in theory, we could still earn royalties off of this if we did earn royalties off of a podcast.
We don't, by the way.
We don't, by the way, unfortunately. But if you were wanting to, it is possible for the creators to still earn royalties off the artwork, for example, when the NFT was subsequently sold in the marketplaces, because once the NFT is minted, then it can subsequently be sold in a marketplace. Now, just to use an analogy to help people understand this, if you imagine that people buy and sell on eBay, now it's the digital equivalent when we talk about NFT marketplaces, that people have these NFTs that they've bought that are linked to normally an image of some kind, and they might buy and sell them. And of course, there are situations where the prices have been insane and they've bought something cheaply and they've made a lot of money subsequently. But equally, there are people who have lost a lot of money. Now, this is a completely unregulated environment we're talking about here. So there's very much a wild west situation. And what's happened, just like where we had the internet in the 1990s, suddenly everybody thought that this was amazing technology, we've all got to jump on it, and then we had a bit of a boom and a bust. Then there's a potential for NFTs are being talked about as the game-changing technology that is going to revolutionize the world. Now, there is an underlying principle to that I can have sympathy with, because the technology, as I mentioned on the previous podcast, I mentioned on this one, could have some interesting applications, and the technology is likely to be around in the future. The difference is that people have to be aware of is that just like the 1990s, when everybody was buying stocks in internet companies because they thought the internet was the next big thing, it was the next big thing. The technology was, and it's now here still today and has revolutionized the world. It was just at the beginning, when all the hype surrounds it, that the companies that were created and the visions and the ideas that were trying to take advantage of that, there's a lot of hot air and initially euphoria, over optimism, or whatever you want to call it, then popped. But the fundamentals of the technology still have transformed people's lives. Now, the way I look at NFTs, that is potentially what this technology could be. But I'm going to hand over to Andy, actually, because you've now got a bit of understanding of what NFTs are, how they work. They live on the blockchain of some kind, typically Ethereum, because that is a blockchain that can cope with tokens, and you can then buy and sell them. We'll touch upon the buying and selling element of NFTs in a moment, and also a bit more about people who create their own and minting them. But Andy disappeared down a bit of a rabbit hole, because he started looking at the sort of NFTs that exist out there and the things they're being used for and what people are buying and selling in terms of the NFT space, just to give you a hint of what the current state of play is in the NFT universe.
Yeah, so as Damien mentioned there, art is the kind of the key or the primary area where NFTs are focused, and there's lots and lots of digital unique images that people can essentially buy and trade. But when you dig a little bit deeper, and there's lots of different platforms out there that list these NFT opportunities, and don't forget, you can not only buy NFTs, you can create NFTs too, which Damien will touch on later and just simplify that side of things. And so the top platforms that are out there at the moment, the number one that's mentioned everywhere and is number one on all the lists and all the sites, and this isn't an endorsement of them, it's just a matter of fact. It's a company called OpenSea, and there are a number of NFT opportunities on there that, and essentially you'll be paying in Ethereum, and that'll be through your wallet. And again, Damien will probably explain a bit more about that later. So you've got OpenSea. There's another company called Rarible, Foundation, Axie Infinity Market, which is, I went down a rabbit hole on that one. I won't explain in great detail, but lots and lots of weird images and cartoons basically on that platform. You've got something called NBA Top Shot, which I really went down too deeply, really. And NBA, just a bit of a side note, NBA Top Shot is essentially an American website that focuses on digital NFTs, and they're basically media video shorts, generally under 30 seconds, that you buy through purchasing packs. So it's I don't know if you've ever collected stickers or you've done that kind of thing. It's essentially a digital version of that. You buy a pack, you don't know what you're going to get, and then you open it up, and there'll be various media clips, images, movies of NBA players scoring dunks and doing amazing things. And you will then be an owner of an NFT in that sense. So, I mean, this is the kind of thing we're getting onto.
Yeah, and one thing I just want to draw comparisons with, or parallels perhaps, because some of the early ones that Andy mentioned, if you go onto them and you look at those platforms, you'll be scrolling through some very simplistic imagery and some perhaps even better artwork, but it's just looking at almost a sea of eBay-esque images that you can click on. It will tell you the price of this image, this NFT that you're going to hopefully own if you wanted to buy it, and how much it will cost, and you'll see the transaction history of who previously owned it and how much they bought it for. So we're just going through and scrolling through this sea of typically images, but as Andy said, the application of NFTs is much broader. And the reason I just wanted to mention about that NBA basketball idea is because, again, I'm not going to mention Tottenham at every turn on this podcast, but let's say, for example, Harry Kane beats the goal scoring record, which he's likely to do. I think he's got about 30 goals, I make this podcast, to be the all-time highest goal scorer at Tottenham. Now, what the equivalent, if they were going to create NFTs of this, somebody like Tottenham Hotspur might create NFTs where there's digital footage of Harry Kane scoring that goal, and even though that footage is distributed everywhere, you could own the NFT, so because it's the token that you own, so you own the NFT that's associated with a particular clip of Harry Kane scoring that goal. So for a Tottenham fan, they might think that that has some intrinsic value because they have the equivalent in their mind of maybe it's like owning Harry Kane's boots at which he scored that goal with. It's not, because it's not a physical item, but it's the piece of history that they might think is expressed in a digital format that they might want to own. Now, yes, that's a way far leap out there, because if you're like me, you'd be quite happy just watching it on TV, but there will be people who might deem that they want to collect some of these iconic moments in Tottenham's history. So that is where you can see that there will be all these other clips, but there will be some clips that will be more valuable in terms of sentimentality or something that has more relevance in history to Tottenham Hotspur fans. Think of the Gaza free kick in the 1991 Cup semi-final in Wembley. They play it over and over and over and over again every time I go and watch Tottenham play in the stadium. Somebody might say, yeah, I own a NFT of that, and therefore somebody else might want to own that NFT. Yes, it doesn't mean you own the copyright or the distribution rights, but it's just a little bit of those bragging rights, which is what happens when you own an NFT, and that's effectively what you're buying.
Another thing that's really interesting about this NFT universe is that it's very attractive to those that enjoy collecting. Now, if you think about years gone by, we used to collect stamps, we used to collect coins, and even now, of course, children these days are collecting stickers for their sticker albums.
Well, don't forget football stickers, Andy. We used to collect them, and me and you are obsessed with Pokemon.
Pokemon as well.
We're going to an aside on the podcast that I've not mentioned this before, but I've gained a mild addiction to Pokemon Go that's been going on for nearly a year now. And if you see me walking the streets, you probably see me playing Pokemon Go. And I've actually managed to get Andy just equally as hooked. So Pokemon is a natural parallel to some of this NFT stuff.
Exactly. So it leans on that sort of collectible thing where you can go online, you can see collections, you can actually go on and say, yep, I own that. And so, and in fact, we mentioned Pokemon earlier. If you go onto the OpenSea platform and type in Pokemon, you will see that there are unique illustrations that have been licensed by Pokemon to be sold as NFTs. And they're actually very sought after. There's only a few of them. So, and that's what creates this buzz. Unique items that people would like to buy and own. And effectively, they can either go up or down in cost, and they can trade those if they want. And actually, while we're touching on Pokemon as well, when I looked at Pokemon on OpenSea, a very, very weird set of NFTs popped up. Someone has actually created a load of Pokemon-looking characters out of fish, sushi, in essence, fish and rice. And they've then put them onto the platform, and they're being sold and traded. And I mean, that is the perfect example.
That is, they're on the platform. Are people, has anybody bought those ones?
Yep, they've been bought and traded.
See, this is where things are a little bit crazy. So for as much as NFT technology has its uses, and you can see where people might use it and want to buy and collect things digitally, and it might be associated with real physical things as well. Like I said, you might be able to use it when buying and selling properties in the future, using NFTs to be associated to your house, make things easier. I mentioned that on the previous podcast, and that sort of thing is great. But of course, the problem is you've also got this very strange world where somebody is taking pictures of sushi that is shaped like a Pokemon and then selling those pictures online to somebody who wants to buy that with a digital currency. For that to have higher value in the future, it needs quite a lot of planets to realign in terms of Pokemon being popular, people still wanting sushi, but also things made out of sushi, and the whole NFT thing still being something that people want to engage with. That is where the NFT world is getting a bit, for my liking, way out there.
I didn't for 1 minute think before I came in this morning that we'd be talking about Pokemon sushi. So that just shows how strange this
I'm
world
more worried
is.
that we've lost people who now realise that me and Andy like Pokemon Go, and they've just now completely switched off. So you've got NFTs and you've got this technology, and it has its uses, and there are people who are buying things and selling them, people making money, people losing lots of money. It's using this technology, ownership of items. The problem we've got that you've got to be aware of is that this is a wild west and it's unregulated. So people are going on in that fad. And what happens, there are a lot of influencers who are saying, this is the future, you've got to be on it. If you're not, you're not going to get rich. And the community built around these often have that kind of feel to them as well. But the problem is that when you get these early stage things going on, that you also get people who think that therefore just to be part of it, they've got to buy anything and they've got to go and buy this stuff because they're going to miss the boat. Now, to draw an analogy again, think about that internet back in the 1990s. Just because you didn't go and buy stuff in the 1990s or buy stocks in particular companies, that then eventually the dot-com crash came and people lost lots of money, it didn't exclude you from being a part of the internet or building an internet company or business using that technology in the future. It doesn't mean that you have to be part of the NFT phase right now. At the moment, it is a very strange place in my view, but that doesn't mean it's not going to evolve just like the internet did. And it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to not try and understand what's going on over there, but you have to be aware that there is a lot of stuff going on that is part of like almost a mania, a bit of a craze. And so you don't have to, and I advise people not to just go on and go, I've got to own an NFT and go and buy stuff because it's going to go up in value, because the value will only go up if somebody wants to buy that thing that you've bought, that weird little image of a potato in a hat or whatever it might be in the future. And that is something that you just can't guarantee. And one thing I just want to touch upon before Andy carries on with some of the weird and wonderful things he's seen on the NFT universe is that often what happens is the NFT might be associated with a project of some kind. So the people who mint and create the NFTs, who they then start selling them in the marketplace and people buy them, might generate hype around these things. That's how they start to get people buying them. And there are different ways that people do that, but there are also associated projects. So you might look at some of them and they might say that with the money they're going to get from selling these NFTs, they're going to go and create something else. It might be a computer game, it might be something completely random like an online casino or whatever it is. And hopefully your NFT associated with this very successful project, which you don't probably have any real details on, might then go up in value. So that is the way that some of these things are marketed. You have to be very careful because the world of lots of promises and quite vague descriptions of stuff. But fundamentally, you're owning something that lives on the blockchain. So you're owning an NFT. And whether projects succeed or fail, it has a hint of people trying to get into early tech startups and they want that sort of FOMO. And you need to be careful of that kind of thing. So I'm not going to stand here and tell people, do not go and buy NFTs. I'm telling you the risks that are out there and what this world is. And just because people are saying you're going to miss out, that isn't a reason to just necessarily inhabit it. But equally, the NFT technology is going to be around probably for quite some time. And again, I keep talking about Tottenham Hotspur this week. You can imagine the technology that now Tottenham has digital season tickets. So you have a season ticket that's in your phone, in your Apple wallet, that updates every home game that you go to. But in theory, in future, they could be associated with an NFT that you could give that to somebody else so they could go to a game that you can't make. But it means there's only one copy of that season ticket, because at the moment, the way the systems work, people can just take photos of the digital season ticket they have on their phones and WhatsApp it to somebody else who could then go in their place. And of course, that inherently is a flaw to the system which Tottenham are running, which is a great system. But things like NFTs could start to stop that, because they can apply an inherent uniqueness to something that is digital.
Yeah, and so I'll touch on a couple more sort of weird and odd things that I found in this NFT world. And I was drawn to the music side of things because I like editing and podcasting and things like that. Audio glyphs is something that lives in the music section, if you like, on these NFT worlds. And audio glyphs are randomly generated clips of infinite audio that is playable out through your computer. So essentially, a computer has come up with some code or whatever to create this audio that's unique, and you would own that audio, and therefore, if you want to, you could trade it. What I don't get is what makes that particular bit of audio more attractive than another bit of audio. I suppose it's in the eyes of the beholder. People can click on. That's the weird
The ears of the beholder.
The ears of the beholder, exactly. And another thing I noticed while I was researching this is the interactivity of some of these NFTs. And so what they have done is they've created an element of gamification and synchronization between the NFT and technology. So to try and explain what I mean by that, there is one set of NFTs that are called cool pets. And what they are is effectively you will buy a random NFT that's purely got a number associated to it. And that is an egg. Okay, so you buy the egg. Now that egg will actually generate into something.
I'm looking over Andy's shoulder at the moment, and I just can see basically a page full of identical looking, badly drawn images of eggs.
Yeah, and what you're buying there is an item that will generate into something. So I'll read out what it says here. All pets start as an egg and evolve into their final form, which represents one of four elements: grass, fire, water, or air, which actually is very similar to how sort of Pokemon works if you actually get involved in Pokemon. Users can then evolve each pet through our gamified experience, and then they give the website address, and your final pet that you end up with is one of 17 million possible outcomes. So you can see there that they've actually integrated an NFT which you buy, and then through gamification and through interaction through the application will end up with your final NFT, whatever that will be, because it will evolve into X.
And so you basically got this game going on. How much does an egg cost?
So there are over 18,000 eggs available in this particular NFT. Cool Pets is the name, of which 10,800 are owned. So that would tell you there's about 8,000 eggs available to buy. And the prices range. I mean, we've got from low to high here. 1 Ethereum. Again, remember these NFTs are being traded in cryptocurrency. So 1 Ethereum right up to 1,200 Ethereum.
So for everybody listening to this podcast, they're thinking, so what's that in real money?
So right now, Ethereum is trading at £2,297 per coin. So basically, we're looking at anything between, the cheapest egg is around about £2,200, and the most expensive egg you can get on here is pushing north of £2.75 million.
So I'm like everybody listening to this podcast is thinking how, what, why. I'm not going to engage with that to try even comprehend what is going on there and that sort of pricing and how they're any different to each other. But this shows you that what's going on in that universe of NFTs. And one thing I want to touch upon before we go, because obviously there was this idea that if you're an artist of some kind, so let's say me and you, Andy, we did want to sell this podcast as an NFT. So we'd create an NFT, we'd mint one. So one way to give you an idea of how you would do it is you would use something like OpenSea. And what you'd need is a wallet that's compatible with the Ethereum blockchain. So you would use something like MetaMask or Coinbase, for example, which can provide you with a wallet in which you can therefore interact with the blockchain. Because don't forget, things like Coinbase are just crypto platforms. So remember, going back to that previous podcast I talked about, they are like the Hargreaves of this world. So you have platforms when you're buying and selling investment funds, you need a platform. Then things like Coinbase are those platforms you use when you're going to the crypto universe. So once you've signed up, you will have to pay a creator fee of 2.5% of any sale that you have. This is just a broad example. Things will change. You then make a file. Well, once we've stopped this and you've edited it, Andy, we'll be all done and dusted. We've got something, we'll upload it. Once you've uploaded the file, you can also choose to earn some royalties when the thing's traded in future. And then you choose the blockchain you're going to put it on. And a lot of people seem to pick something like Polygon, which works with the Ethereum coins, but also has relatively low fees. And then once you've minted your NFT, you can then list it, and then people can go and buy and sell it. And of course, that is how you then, in theory, could sell this episode as an NFT, but people don't own the copyright to it, as I've mentioned before. So that is the dream world of how people could turn their digital art into something that people could buy and sell. I mean, I've read around this topic quite a bit, and there are some negatives that seem to be out there where the royalties don't always seem to get paid, and that can be partly because of the way the platforms work in terms of when a transaction occurs. So things don't always run as smoothly as they should do, and also nobody might want to buy the Money to the Masses NFT podcast, so therefore we've done all that and we've not actually achieved anything. And don't forget, in order to be able to buy and sell, interact with this world, you're going to need cryptocurrencies, and there are fees associated with turning your real money into cryptocurrencies as well. So the NFT universe is fascinating, but I see it fascinating right now from a point stood well off and watching what's going on there. I actually stepped back when I did that, so the sound audio would have dipped as I did that. But it's something you're going to read more and more about, but it's something you've got to be aware of the risks. And so anybody listening to this podcast, I don't think people should necessarily be, as it stands now, being rushed to engage with this NFT universe, because like the early days of the internet, there's a lot going on. And at the moment, there's some absolutely pretty wild things that are being bought and sold on there by people who unfortunately may in time find that they lose their money. I know everyone's an adult and they can do as they please, but it doesn't stop NFTs being an incredibly fascinating technology and something I think we're going to end up coming back to and talking about in the future.
What I'd potentially like to ask of listeners is if you've got involved in this already, if you are an NFT enthusiast, if you hold NFTs, get in touch, because we'll be fascinated to learn your experiences.
Yeah, and that's good as well as bad. I mean, you can do it anonymously. We don't have to give us your name or anything like that. We won't publish it, but I'm always fascinated, particularly like say there might be positive stories, there might be negative stories, because obviously people who inhabit that universe will disproportionately talk about the positives. And you hear words like diamond hands, which is a phrase that means that people will actually hold on to these things forever and a day till they make money. And you can listen to what I've been talking about in this podcast. Park NFTs to one side for a moment. Just ditch NFTs and think of that technology. Put it to one side. And what the real issue that people have to think about is that if you are ever buying and selling something based on a lot of high potential promises or hope, and that hope includes not just the hope or promises from what the thing might become, but that someone might want it to buy it from you in the future, whatever that is. And that's saying not associated with NFTs, that is a high risk strategy if you're going to try and make money over the long term. It's speculation rather than investing, in my opinion. So what you can see, that at its core is one of the big problems that's going on inside the NFT world and outside of it. So it's a warning to people who will want to get involved.
Okay, so that's we've covered quite a lot there, but we wanted to keep it concise. We wanted to keep it as short as we could. But if you've enjoyed that and you had extra questions, or there are certain parts of it that you'd like us to sort of dig a little deeper into, or do another podcast on it, then we can do that. Get in touch. The email address, as always, is damien@moneytothemasses.com. We're on Twitter and Instagram and YouTube and all the usual places. Don't forget, we've also got the Facebook group that you can put comments into there, and you can do it anonymously as well. So if there's questions you've got or experiences that you wanted to share with the group, stick them in there.
Yeah, please do. Like I say, particularly if there's something in there that if you want to issue a warning to other people, because real stories have a much more meaningful impact. So yeah, that is it, Andy. One thing I want to throw out there is that we've created a new Money to the Masses mug. I've been throwing mugs out like confetti in the last week or so. So if you've done anything that's mug worthy, do get in touch. Let us know what it is, and we can send out a mug to you if we deem it mug worthy. Do please review the podcast, but as I mentioned, we've created a new version of the Money to the Masses mug. And for podcast listeners, I will tell you what it is, because it's a 28-day challenge mug. So if you've completed the 28-day financial fitness challenge, then get in touch. Tell us how much your Money MOT score, which you would have taken partway through the challenge, had improved by the end when you took the final Money MOT. And we will then send you out a mug in the post. So do get in touch. So that's it for this week, Andy. Until next time.
Until next time.